And before we get to the first long stay, it's the run-up to the first long stay. So after that period in 1924, in Ahmednagar, Mera and her mother, Daulat Mai, stayed in Kushu quarters along with Khurshid. Franey was there. They were newly married. And so therefore, Daulat Mai and Mera also stayed there. Khurshid was the cousin of Ari and Rustam. So she also stayed there in their cousin's place. They slept on mats. Baba kept them in one room, told them not to do socializing. While they were there, they had particular things to do, specific things to do, to remember Baba. One thing they did was write the name Yazdan thousands of times on pieces of paper that would be rolled up and put into little tubes. And Baba said later he might bring them to the ocean and put them into the ocean to feed the fish. Things like that they did. They were ordered to do that so many times a day. They were ordered to meditate a certain way. And they were told to sew shirts. In September they started sewing shirts. Baba wanted to give clothes to the poor people of Arangan. So they would see Baba occasionally. Baba would be in and out, but they would see Baba occasionally, and he would ask them how many shirts they had completed, and they would give him a number. And he said, that's not enough, work quickly, do more. So they increased their sewing work every day, till they finally had 100 shirts completed. Then they all were invited to Meherabad that day. They all means there weren't many people. Mera and her mother, Khurshid, Kulmai, Rustam and Franey, for a program on the veranda of the post office. So Baba invited the poor people of Arangan to come. And there was music. He had a couple of bags of prasad. Prasad then was what? Peanuts and some parched rice, or something very basic and simple. Maybe some sweet thing with sugar in it. The bags were opened up. There were only 3 mandali with Baba then. Gustaji, Masaji, his uncle, and Padri. They were the 3 with Baba at Meherabad during that time. So there was some music. Then Baba did a poor program there. Something he did very often through the years. So he started, there were basically three sizes of shirts, and he started with the youngest children. He would pick out a boy and give him a shirt. Have his mother would bring the boy, and then he'd have them hold the shirt that he gave them, and he would, with his hands, put so much prasad on that till it was spilling over. And they would go, and each of them was given that. And they were so happy to have something from Baba, but they were so happy to have something anyway. And as they were leaving, Baba would say to Daulat Mai, see how happy they look? Doesn't it make you happy when you see happy people? Yes. And that was their life with Baba there. They stayed. Then, soon after, they were called to stay in the post office. When they came to the post office, Khurshid had this idea that, we're going to be staying with Baba now. We should be, like it was with the Pasti Maharaj, we should be a little austere. So we'll give up our pillows. Mera said, oh, you think so? She agreed. Now Mera was 17. Khurshid was not 15, 14 and a half. So they came to Meherabad. Of course, Baba, the way he was, came in inspecting. So, where are you sleeping? You sleep here, you sleep. This is your bedding? Whose bedding is this? Mine, Baba. Where's your pillow? We thought we shouldn't have pillows, Baba, because we're here with you. Who gave you that idea? Where are your chappals? In Sakori. This is not Sakori. You're here with me. And he put it very simply to them. You don't want to stay here like this. What I tell you to do, you can stay in Ahmednagar. No, Baba, whatever you say. This is not Sakori. We have thorns and scorpions here. You wear chappals and you sleep on a pillow. Okay. Mera had brought some of her books with her. That's all they had to occupy free time, besides the things that Baba had given them to do. So she would read sometimes in the evening to the other women to help them also learn English. She would read their books. And after not more than 5 days or so, Baba said, no more reading, send the books back. No more reading, no more writing. First order there. So already the women in 1924, before the men had even returned, the women are getting, here at Meherabad, getting orders from Baba like that. They would spend a lot of time with Baba during that time because there were so few people there. Very quiet. That's where the one day Baba asked Mehra, do you know any English songs on that veranda there of the post office? She couldn't remember. Then she remembered, well, I remember this song, Swani. So she taught Baba Swani. And the next day in the morning, she heard Baba walking up this path to the post office singing Swani. One morning, Daulat Mai looked out the window. She heard Baba singing and she said, look, Baba's dancing. He was dancing up the path, singing a song that Khorshid had taught him. So it was a very special time with Baba. Baba used to sit on a crate. On the furniture was tea crate motif. So, and Baba used to drink his tea from an aluminum lota that he used for washing, drinking his tea. That was it. So Mehra would serve him his tea. That would have to be served in a special way, wrap a cloth around it, hold it, pour the tea so he wouldn't burn his hands. Then he might they would bring it and then put it in a thing of water so it wouldn't be too hot. It had to be hot, but then not too hot, so that it was ready exactly at the right temperature that Baba would like. Couldn't be cooked on a wood fire. He didn't like the taste of smoke in his tea. They were learning all these particular things. Simple, but very particular. So that was life with them then, and Baba would tell them, take advantage of the time with me. You have no idea how fortunate you are. This won't last. They became intoxicated with that atmosphere, because besides them then there was also Naja, Daulamasi, Shri, my sister, and Big Khorshid. So the 6 of them were the first 6 who stayed here in the post office that time. On November 18th, Baba went into seclusion in the Jopti again for a week. And this time, Padri was his assistant, and he kept silence the whole time. It was during that period where Padri told the story. He was exhausted and he fell asleep during the night, and he woke up in the morning and finally woke up to Baba's knocking. And Baba's writing to him and gesturing. What the hell have you been doing? I've been awake half the night trying to get you up, writing you messages. You're sleeping the sleep of, what's that, Kumbhakarna? What's that guy that slept for 6? Yeah. Who used to sleep for 6 months at a time. So that seclusion was over.
This structure is no more, right?
Pardon? Not in, it's long gone. This is a model.
But these are the same stones that were used for the Samadhi.
Yeah, we'll get to that maybe. We may not get to that. We may. Tomorrow afternoon. So that seclusion was finished. After 7 weeks staying here, they went back to Bombay. Baba did seclusion again in Bombay, keeping silence again there also. They came back to Meherabad on January 25th. And the next day, again, Baba went into seclusion in the Jopti and again kept silence. So now he's got 3 1 week periods of keeping silence and seclusion, and that one initial period of keeping silence and seclusion he's done. Baba had said he had planned to come back to Meherabad and stay for some time. His birthday was coming up also. So then more and more people began to come. And now let's go to the next image, please. This is a fine image that we have of Baba's birthday celebrated at Meherabad. And this is the actual veranda east of the post office. So now you get an actual look of what it was. These are some of the images, some of the people here. Of course, here is Baba. And this is Kaikushru Khansab. This is Daula Masi's husband, Ferdun, known as Ferdun Masa, Baba's uncle, also very devoted to him. Some of the other people in here. This is Adi Jr., Baba's brother, right here. Here's Mani, right here. See? Here's Baba's mother, Shireen Mai, Mera, Gul Mai, Frani, Dina Talati, who sewed the first flag. She's there. This is Padri. Pendu is over here, somewhere, right there. And some of these other people, I won't. Here's Naval Talati, another one of the early disciples. Pila Mai from Karachi, known as Baba's spiritual sister. Let's go to the next image. Might be a little closer. But before we go, let's go back again. You see what they had done is stretched a pandal here to the east of the post office. This is that thin burlap. And this is how they would create shaded areas, or pandals, during those festival times. So this was something that was there at the time. Stretched over up on top. Decorated, this typical decoration, banana leaves and festoons of flags, different things like that. Now let's go to the next image, a little closer. You can see the people here a little better in this image. I'll see if I've missed anybody. There are some old ones, some old Iranis that would come through the years, but this is the basic crowd here. You don't see Naja in this picture. Naja was working. Naja was always the one to have to work. Baba is also not in a very happy looking mood here. This was taken around the lunchtime, maybe late morning. What happened was that Naja came out across the veranda here and chuckled, remembering a dog that had stolen the yogurt, the dahi, from inside the kitchen. And Baba got up and called her and slapped her across the face, humiliating her in front of all the guests. For what? No reason. Saying, you're laughing at men here? This is the way you behave? Remember, here, you don't do such things. Naja was very hurt, went to the kitchen, humiliated, crying, back to work. Baba took that incident and told these people, I don't like men and women behaving like this in my presence. You do whatever you like outside. Here, you don't behave like that. What happened was there were some people from Bombay, some women from Bombay, who were tittering and giggling and talking, doing that thing. And Baba didn't appreciate that. He sent them all to rest after lunch, and he called Naja, embraced her, kissed her, and said, I had to do this because I had to make a point to these people. Don't take this to heart. I had something in mind. She understood, then it was all fine. This is a common thing that Meher Baba would use during his years. He would use one of the people who were strong enough, who were not guilty of something, to make an example to others who couldn't tolerate his strict discipline. Those were only for people who are very close. People who are strong enough to tolerate that. Let's go to, well, before we go, we still have Gulmai here. Let's go to the next image. That day, Baba allowed the women for the first time to wash his feet. After his feet were washed, he had Gulmai take the water back to the well and pour it into the original well. And he made the comment, the water of this well will always be my prasad now. This is Mera here in the back. Baba's mother, Shireen Mai. A few days after the birthday, sometime during that period, Baba sent a message in to the post office with Gustaji. Who has gold rings? Anybody with gold rings? Baba wants to know. Send them. Mera had a gold ring that Upasti Maharaj had given her. So she quickly took it off as quickly as she could. It was kind of stuck on her finger, and sent it out. Big Khorshid was there with her wedding ring, and she thought, Baba can't mean my wedding ring. So she didn't give her ring. So Mera's ring went out to Baba, and he came back a few minutes later with that ring and another ring. He put that ring that Upasti Maharaj had given Mera back onto her finger, and over that he put another new ring of gold over that. It was a heart-shaped ring that said Baba inside. And she wore those, both of those rings stayed on her fingers for the rest of her life. During that time, one day Baba said, who knows who my Radha is? And the different women were guessing. Some people even said Gustaji. Some said Gulmai. No. And then he indicated, Mera is my Radha. Her love is unique and very special. This was all early 1925. Now the women also had another order. They couldn't speak to the men. This happened, Mera thought, because Naja, during the period in 1924 in October, used to talk to Masaji, her father, a lot. There was only a few men and a few women there, but Naja used to converse with her father. And therefore Baba passed this order by this point, that the women were not to speak to the men. And of course by that point they were getting the idea, you don't look at men, you don't have anything to do with them. Although, during this period, the men also had tea and ate there on the veranda of the post office. The men would line up on the south long side, and the women would be on the north side towards the opening, the door of the post office. And they stayed apart in that sense, that way. More and more people started coming. Let's go to the next image, let's see what it is. Now, this compound was built around the north side of the post office. So this is where the men would be lined up on this side, and the women would stay here. And you can see there's a little opening here to this. There was kitchen here. They would stay in here. The cooking would be done here, and there were toilets here. This was their life inside the compound. And while Baba was still speaking, whenever they were working in the compound, they were in their own world. They would do whatever their work was, but all the time their mind was on listening, hearing Baba's voice. He might sing, he might give a discourse. They couldn't see him, but they could hear it. They could hear him in the distance. So they were constantly preoccupied with remembering and trying to get the sound of Baba. The women were given the responsibility to cook for the growing community. More and more people were coming because they had heard that Baba was in one place now. So, one thing I didn't tell you is that in 1924, Baba had begun work with the children of Varangan. At first there were a few of them, and he would entice them to come by just being very friendly, conversing with them, asking them questions. What's your name? What do you do? Where are your parents? Do you wash in the morning? No. Well, this is how you should wash. And he'd wash their face, give them something to eat. Then he would teach them nursery rhymes or tukaram bhajans, things like that. And he did this work a little bit in 1924. Then he passed it on to Arjun Supekar, one of his close disciples. So Arjun did that work, and it became one of the nightly entertainments in 1924. What was that? They would sing. Baba enjoyed their singing. Why? Because they couldn't sing at all. We really like their squeaky voices and their lack of harmony. But that work continued now. Those boys started, the children all started coming again while Baba was here. They would meet at, there is a tree here, I'm going to show you just on this map. We won't go to the main map, but we can go here, unless you have the main map up there. Okay. There's a map.
This one?
It'd be another one. Anyway, it doesn't matter because the tree is the same. There's a tree here. You see, this is a tree that's right next to the road. This is upper. Let's go back to the other one. There's a tree here. Right next to the road. It's still alive. One of the few that's still alive. A neem tree. And this is the tree where Baba used to meet with those children in the early days, beneath the shade of this tree. And gradually they came more and more. And there was a temple then built in this area here for them. These are the untouchable boys and girls. Mostly the untouchable boys, no untouchable girls. They never had these kind of things. There was a simple temple built of bamboo matting in this area so that they could sing their bhajans that they had started the previous year. That was in this area here. And as time went by, more and more people were coming. One day Baba said, to make a drama of it, what's happening here? All of you people are coming to sit on my head? You have to make productive use of your time here. We have to help the people of Varangiam. And at the same time, not only children, but the afflicted people were coming. They needed a lot of help medically. So on March 21st, the hospital was opened in the old bungalow. Let's go back. That was right here. The old bungalow is here. Right here. All right. Now let's go back. Different map. We just go back to that. This map shows what we have here. There's the old bungalow. That's the next image. Yes, that's it. Yeah. Let's go back. This is Baba in 1925 anyway. We're going the wrong direction. Let's go back the other way. Okay, somehow this isn't working properly here. You're going the wrong direction. How did that happen? Okay, let's stay here. You can give me the next image. There, let's stay here. This is a photograph that was taken later, but it's going to give you an idea of the old bungalow there. What was the mess quarters became on March 21st, the Irani New Year, Jamshedi Navroz. This is the view from the east, but there was a grand opening on the opposite side that day for Meher Charitable Dispensary and Hospital. This side was opened up as a hospital, and this side was kept as a schoolroom for the higher caste boys. You can see the tank rooms up here, and back here was where the post office was over here. So March 21st, yes?
Is that 1925?
This is now 1925, yes. March 21st, 1925. Rustam opened the lock in its opening ceremony, specially decorated lock with Kanseb, his father, standing by. That was the Irani New Year. 4 days later, on Gudi Padwa, the Hindu New Year, they opened up a school for the poor boys of Varangiam. And there were some girls also. The girls were in this school with the higher caste boys, and the lower caste boys were in the other school. This whole school was named after Baba's first master, Hazrat Babajan School. At first it was woven bamboo panels, nothing much, but they ordered corrugated galvanized sheets, steel sheets, to improve the quality of the school. The following month that happened. Baba took an intense interest in these activities. They were very serious. Now he took very intense interest and he focused the mandali on these works. In the hospital specifically, Padri was given the responsibility of a compounder and Pendu was the manager. A doctor from Ahmednagar named Karkal was hired to be the general doctor after the first doctor didn't work out. He was an eye doctor. So sometime within the following months, Baba, through discussions with him, told the men to make this room down here a special operating room, because Dr. Karkal, in a secure, clean environment, could do eye operations. That was an added feature of the hospital at the time. The school, in the meantime, began to function with basic classes, certified curriculum. Baba's particular interest was bringing up the low caste, and he did that through the boys and through their families. He started by washing the clothes of the boys, so many per day, and then he began washing the boys near the original well. There was a spot there that was paved with Shahabad stones, flat flagstones, and there the mandali would hold the gear, the towels, the soap, the clean clothes for the boys, while Baba would wash them. He wouldn't let anybody help him when he first started doing this work. The only thing they could do is hold things and hand it to him. You've seen images of Baba. You've probably seen the film of the Rahuri the Rahuri ashram in 1937, where Baba was bathing the godmad. It was always like that. The Baba would do 30, 40 boys at a time. Work for 3-4 hours, maybe. He could do 8 to 9 boys per hour. It was very fast, extremely efficient. He was very thorough. It was his work to clean these lower caste people. One day while Baba was washing a couple of these boys, 2 higher caste men had come. They wanted Baba's darshan. Baba told them, the God I worship is in these Harijan boys. You're welcome to worship here with me. If you don't like it, go back to your temple and worship in any way you like. It was too much for them and they left. This was a typical thing. In the coming months, if Baba would be invited for tea, let's say, to a place in Arangaon, there would be a place maybe inside the house where the higher caste people would go, and they would expect Baba to be in that environment, and meantime the Mahars and the lower caste people would be outside, but Baba would always stay outside with the lower caste people. Again, Ram's birthday was celebrated that year. He was still encouraging the Hindus to celebrate their religious holidays was the thing that he was doing. Now it had gradually come into a different direction now, which was he's letting them spend all of this in his environment while they still had it. And because it was helping the schoolboys and integrating the castes, Baba was allowing it. Now in the school, Vishnu was a Brahmin, early disciple of Baba since he was 15 years old, was the main teacher. And the director of what was called the director of the depressed classes at the time, director of education of the depressed classes, was Arjun Supekar. He was an illiterate man, also low caste himself. And eventually he was made the director of education of Meherabad. This is typically Baba, but for a specific reason. because Arjuna was so enthusiastic and particular about doing his best to obey Baba's orders. Ram's birthday was celebrated on April 2nd that year, and this year they fed 5,000 poor people the next day. Again, music was always there. They had different people who would play for Baba. Even at Manzalimim, occasionally some of those musicians who played at Manzalimim would come to Meherabad and perform for Baba. And that night, when Ram's birthday celebration happened, they started something new. That was, they started showing films at the post office. So that east wall of the post office that we saw in the photograph of Baba's birthday, they would hang a sheet on that wall. And people would sit back under the pandal, and the film would be projected onto the wall. Something the village people had never seen films before. This was Chanji and Naval Talati coming from Bombay. Chanji, before he became one of Baba's disciples, had a cinema house there. So they would bring films and project them. Naval would take care of all the gear and equipment that it took to run everything. There was also a man, high caste man from Nagar, who was a lawyer. He was known as Angal pleader, generally, who was very skilled at giving Puranic lectures. So part of his routine then became, on every Sunday morning, he would give a lecture to the boys about Puranas. Sometimes other days also, Thursdays. Thursdays and Sundays were the important days. Thursday, Guruvar, and Sunday was a holiday. So more people usually would come on Thursdays and Sundays. It was very common for that to be. One day, Baba's mother came to visit. And Shirimai was somebody, maybe the only person, who always told her son exactly what she thought. So on this visit she said, Merog, you have all these women here, young girls here with you staying. You know how it looks. You know how people are gossiping in Pune. How it looks. It doesn't look good. Why do you keep these young girls? And you have to embrace them. You know how it looks, Merog? And Baba's answer was, Mother, if you want, I'll allow you to embrace them too. But she kept on badgering him, and finally got exasperated and said, all right, that's it. All women gone from here. Leave, all of you. The word came in, all of you go. Now the rice and dal is cooking. They had to just drop it and start walking away. But when they would walk, when they were ordered to leave, they would do, like this. I'm going, I'm obeying. They would walk like this. And unless Baba said faster, they would just move like at that pace. And he would let it drag out to see if his mood would change. And the women, Naja and the others, are thinking, well, they're all dressed in their matubanu, looking like Irani servants, thinking, it's going to be a fine scene when we show up at Gulmai's place looking like this. And on and on and on they go. Finally, they get some distance away. There, Shireen Mai is leaving and dragging money. Mani used to tell that story when suddenly there was she didn't know what it was. This was that thing. Shireen Mai is dragging money, who's whining, kicking and dragging the whole way. Why do we have to leave? And finally Baba claps and they're allowed to go back. And Mani goes running back first. It was like that. More than once it happened. That kind of a thing. On the 19th of April, Baba was trying to engage the villagers in devotional activities. So they would have kirtans and these Puran explanations, different things at Meherabad. And he wanted the village people to come, but on the 19th, many of them didn't show up. So his answer to that was that the temple for the higher caste boys was demolished. There was, by that point, 2 temples. So the one for the higher caste boys, he had them demolish the whole thing. He had already assigned one man to be the pujari for these boys in their temple. This is to what extent Baba is engaging the culture at Meherabad as a medium to do his, as a spiritual archetype, as a medium to do his work. He's engaging the culture in this to this extent. There's a pujari hired that he had to say the prayers every 7 o'clock every evening. And so the temple was demolished that day, except for the board on the post of the temple. And he told the pujari, now you just do your puja there at the board. That's it. Over the next few days, they were allowed to rebuild it, but there's more drama that comes. Three days later, Baba was giving another program, and again they didn't show up. So he expels the boys, and their parents come, begging him, please reconsider. And Baba gives them a long lecture. Why do you think I'm here? I'm only here to help you people. Please forgive us, Baba. Yes, we won't. We'll make sure we come. He says, I've only come here for that purpose, to bring up your level. Remember that. So we extracted a new commitment from them after giving them an ultimatum. The ultimatum was, these boys are here, and they must be here specifically under my order, under my direction. Don't interfere with the work here. It requires their full attention. When they're home in the evening, you don't distract them. You allow them to do their schoolwork. There was a lot of sports and competition, always around Baba, but there at Meherabad they have plenty of space, so they would have all these different games. Played cricket and Atya game, common game, a lot of running. They had competitions, sometimes speech competitions, different things. There's a very active life there.
What was the favorite sports? Was it cricket?
Yes, but they had played cricket a lot of cricket games there. On the 28th, for the first time, while they were bathing the boys, Baba allowed Gustaji, they got one of those hand clippers, so Gustaji cut the hair of the boys then before Baba gave them a bath. And that was the beginning of Baba engaging some of the other mandali. Gustaji was the first one to put his hands on them to help Baba in the process. This bathing the boys went on initially at least 2 times a week. And if Baba was very particular about inspecting the condition of the boys, if he saw that any of them weren't clean enough, somebody was reprimanded. And usually it was Vishnu or Arjun. But he would often make Vishnu the whipping post, because he could take it. Number one, he was a dedicated disciple, but it showed the boys that they knew Vishnu was a Brahmin from Pune, and he's treating them like this for our sake. It went into their heads. They took it seriously. Now, I don't know how many of you remember Sidhu. He died in 1975. Sidhu Kamble was one of the disciples from Arangan. He had met Baba in 1924, and Baba said, do you want to be around? Would you like to do things? He said, yes, please. He picked Sidhu out walking down the road. Sidhu was the person Baba wanted. He said, I'm going to send you to Bombay to work for 1 year. Sidhu said, whatever you say, I'll do. So after 1 year, he returned. So now Sidhu is back at Arangan and he sees Baba. And Baba said, do you want to be with me? Sidhu says, I'm ready to do whatever you say. You know the conditions. You have to do whatever I say. You eat what I give you to eat. What all the other mandals are eating. I won't pay you anything. You'll get food and clothing, a place to sleep. That's it. That okay with you? He said, yes, I'll do it. You willing to do anything? You willing to be a sweeper, clean the toilets? Sidhu was hesitant. Bob said, okay, if you don't want to do it, I'll do it. That's what he says. So then he brings Sidhu to the hospital. Looking at the hospital, Baba's inspecting patients. There was a patient, a sick old patient, soiled the bed. Baba doesn't say anything, doesn't ask anything. Cleans the bed, cleans the patient. Sidhu is repulsed. Baba doesn't say anything. Baba says, don't worry. If you don't want to do these things, I'll do the things. Sidhu felt ashamed. And his first day then at Meherabad, as it was with many other people, was a great... Baba didn't waste any time in giving them lessons. So Sidhu was assigned to be the assistant of Pendu in the hospital there. Pendu was the manager of the hospital. He told me the story. He said, every day Baba would find fault. No matter what he did, he tried his best. But somehow every day Baba found some fault. He said, one day I was determined I was going to make it just right. So I got up very early in the morning. I went through everything personally. I made sure everything was just right. And I thought, today Baba will be happy. The Baba came for inspection that morning. He didn't look at anything. He just walked across the cabinet like this with his hand. And he showed me there was some dust on his finger like that. And he slapped me. I said to myself, it's impossible to please him. I'll just leave. What's the point? It's impossible. I can't do it. So he said, I started walking away from Meherabad. And somebody ran shouting, Baba wants you, he's calling you. And I came back. I rushed to Baba and he said, who the hell gave you permission to leave? And he slapped me again. Ever since then I've been here, what can I do? This was their life. There was no choice. These were the people, they didn't have a choice, will I stay today and tomorrow? For those people who are very close. They were slaves. Different issue. On May 6th, again, because the families were inattentive to the devotional programs, Baba expelled the boys from the school. And again, the drama went on. It was like that. It would go on and on. Baba was doing very intense work. He picked a good village with a lot of problems, with a very low level of accomplishment and sanitation as a medium to help these poor. And the battle went on, and he would let these dramas play out for hours sometimes, extracting promises from these people, creating just the right conditions. And he would use it by using their own culture. It wasn't that he was inflicting something upon them. He was giving them what they should, the best of their own culture, and if they didn't take it, then he would create the situation. Of course, after their repenting, again, the whole cycle started again. They came back. It would go on like that. On the 9th, a few more of the Mandali, Bairamji started, and a few of the other Mandali started assisting Baba in this process of bathing the boys. So now gradually, it's coming from just Baba and to all the Mandali, and their level is being brought up. But still, the schools are separate. It's going on like that. In the middle of May, another group of people who had begun to come to Meherabad were provided with a space just here to the east of the hospital in this area. Those were the lepers. There was a leper asylum here, all in here. There was one woman who was a leper who was a very devoted person to Baba. Her name was Parvati, and she was the head of the leper asylum there. So that was established in the middle of May. All of these activities are going on at Meherabad. Upasi Maharaja's birthday was celebrated again on May 10th that year, and all of Meherabad became like a big fair. There were so many people who would love to sing for Baba, but there wasn't always a chance in the venue for them. But on this day, so many people wanted to perform at Meherabad. So they were positioned at different points around Meherabad, and Baba would walk around with some of the Bandali and attend these for a particular period of time. Wonderful stories. You know, there was a famous pair of ascetics from Nagar who came specifically, and they sang their devotional music with their group of followers who assisted them on the veranda of the Jopti, and Baba then came and went lay as they were performing, and then they became very enthusiastic. A big hit, he sent them back in a Tonga so that they wouldn't have to walk. It was different groups. Ghani's brother, Abdul Rahman, was a person who would often sing Qawwali music for Baba. So he was a regular from the time of Manjli Mim, and during Meherabad, especially this first long stay, he would often come and sing for Baba. Baba at the time, the new provision for the school was, for the first solid provision was completed, so that was lined with sheet metal, and Baba was meeting people and giving interviews. It was still at the point where Baba could tolerate the crowd. That is, what I mean by tolerating means that it wasn't so overwhelming where he didn't have to devote all of his time to just giving interviews to people. So he could meet with people and still see other things. And he would give interviews to people at that time in the Hazrat Babajan school. Now, I don't know if you can see that from, we don't have that scan up there, but this is the map we have here. Hazrat Babajan school was built here.
You want me to show you the slide?
You see if you have it. On that, this is another year. On that, and this is upper, another year again.
Not like this?
No. That's why I didn't care to really get involved in these maps. It's just more confusing than it's worth. On that day, also they showed that film Sant Sakubai at the post office. You remember the story of Mara telling that story. They showed the film Sant Sakubai on Maharaja's birthday. And Mara and Naja were sitting behind Baba, watching the film. And Naja reached out and touched Baba's sadra. And Mara thought, I can reach out and touch Baba's sadra too. So she did the same, and suddenly Baba turned around and said, who's touching me? He looks at Mara. Are you in the habit of touching men's clothes? No, Baba. But what had happened now with the film is that it became such a sensation for the village people, and it was an open thing at Meherabad now on that day, that the crowd became so unruly they had to stop the film halfway and show the next half the next day, because these people were causing a panic in the crowd. Yes. So there it is. So here's where Babajan School was, right here. This is the first very small room that the school actually ended up. There were 4 stages of enlargement and improvement to the school, and they were done both to the front and the back through the months to follow. But this is where the school was, right here. This is the post office here, and the school was here. These buildings were built in this area. They were family quarters. There were more than one. There were many people. There were family quarters in this area here, where families could stay. The Mandali at this time were staying in an area over here where there was a temporary kitchen built for the celebration of Upasi Maharaj's birthday. So at that time they were in this area because the mess building was occupied with the hospital and still the higher caste boys in part of this building. And the women, of course, were in the post office during that first long stay. The women were in the post office. It was exclusively their realm. On the 17th, for the first time, the high caste boys and the low caste boys sang the bhajans together, which was a major step forward. But the next day, the villagers failed to attend the kirtan again, and Baba got irritated. And this time, he not only dismantled the temple of the high caste boys for good, he burned the temple of the low caste boys to the ground. So that was the short work of the temples and the devotional stuff for the boys in the form of a temple in that area of Meherabad right here. And the day after, the parents and guardians again came and repented because Baba had also expelled the boys because the families weren't attentive to the devotional programs. And again, the whole so this is going on. This is happening regularly now. Once every few weeks at least this would happen. So one day around that time, Baba sent a message to Bairamji that he wanted the grounds in and around the schools groomed and graded. Bairamji sent a message back, I'm shaving, as soon as I finish I'll get on it. Baba, irritated with that answer, went himself and took the boys, the older boys, and he himself did the work. What does that mean? Also, you know, in India, we spread the cow dung, a little bit of lime, cow dung slurry, and this, after the ground is flat. So Baba first graded that ground, had it all. He himself was working on this and spread the cow dung in this area. And that's why I say, when people go and they see there's nothing here, we should just make a parking lot. Do you know what happened here? This is sacred ground. That was around Babajan school. So another lesson for them, you know, when Baba wants something, you do it immediately. There was no delay in that.
Want some tea, please?
Pardon?
Tea?
No thanks. I'm good. The next day, Baba engaged the Mandali for the first time now also in washing the clothes of the low caste boys. So about 30, 40 of the low caste boys, their clothes were gathered, and the Mandali washed their clothes while Baba bathed the boys. And Baba himself, now he's still speaking, Baba himself is personally teaching the boys bhajans. Now more sophisticated bhajans, because they're learning more. And when he would teach the boys in the evening to sing bhajans, the Mandali were just enchanted with listening to him do it. So it was an entertainment and a lesson in at the same time. There was a blind devotee of Baba's from Ahmednagar named Saularam, who also used to come and sing for Baba. Baba greatly appreciated his dedication. He would come all through this period. One evening there in June, the rains began, and that roof, the gable ends of the roof on the Babajan school was open. So the rain and the wind was driving into the school, and Baba had the mandali come in and put canvas over the boys so the boys wouldn't get wet. While the mandali were getting drenched with this driving rain, they were holding a canvas over these boys. This is how particular Baba was about keeping these boys healthy and safe. After that, the mandali were soaked. Baba himself made a kettle of tea and had them all, after the rain, dry, put on dry clothes, and he served them all fresh tea. It was an interesting thing one day now. This is now in June of 1925. Baba decides one day to have a court of justice in the school. Because some of the boys, there were reports of boys being disobedient, mischievous. So there was a court of justice established. Defense, prosecution was set, cases registered. It was all like a regular court. There was a procedure. So it was very educational and informative for the boys, and also entertaining at the same time. So the cases were presented and heard, prosecution and defense, and in the end, what should be this? You're found guilty. Never do this again. But this is how they learned everything. The next day there were exams and more sports, and whenever they had sports programs, it would be Baba would make it more interesting, saying this is a competition, there would be prizes. So prizes would be Baba would give kerchiefs or something. They had buttons also occasionally. Baba was starting to give people buttons of his. So on the 2nd of June, Baba lectured the boys. He gathered them all around the Jopti, quiet area, and he gave them a lecture, a pep talk on good character again. And then that is when he told them that he was planning to keep silence for 1 year, beginning June 15th. And they should all be ready for that. In the meantime, everybody was told to be very alert and fastidious concerning their particular responsibilities, specifically around their departments. The day after Baba gave that lecture, he asked 15, 16 of the mandali to give him a massage as he stood there, using full force, he said. And I remember Padre used to remember this, tell us this incident. So Baba would stand there, and all of these mandalis said, "Don't be gentle. I want you to massage my body." So Padre said they all started pushing as vigorously as they could. He said some of the people had their feet up on posts and trying to push against Baba. 15, 16 men doing this for 15, 20 minutes. They were all perspiring, exhausted, and Baba was unaffected. Didn't budge. He just was like a post, and they couldn't move him, and he was unaffected, and he seemed to enjoy it. I mean, the diarist was Ajuba for the Combined Diaries at the time. His comment was something like, he gave us, despite his frail body, he gave us a display of his superhuman strength. They went to Bombay for a week. Mera remembered that trip also. Baba would occasionally go still. This was his last trip to Bombay for a long time. Part of this was procurement of supplies for the ashram. Clothes, not clothes, particular material, specific material, khaki material for the clothes for the boys that would have to be made. There was a tailor that was hired around that time to make clothes for the boys a few weeks before. And Baba, the day after he brought material back the first time, spent the whole day with the tailor saying the pattern has to be such and such, specifically like this, like that. They were given a type of uniform in the school. Baba got back to Meherabad and did his typical inspection of the day and was irritated because he saw a report that one of the patients from the hospital who was a little bit mentally agitated got up in the night and slept on the ground somewhere and became very stiff. So Baba reprimanded again Pendu, Padri, people at Sidhu, people working at the hospital. And now that it was monsoon, he wanted them to have more blankets. So what were the blankets? This was a mandali sleeping bag. A mandali sleeping bag was 2 gunny sacks sewn together, and they open up the other end. That's how they slept. And beside a regular sheet and blanket, if they needed more blankets, the patients got these. They were clean, they weren't dirty, but gunny sacks. It was gunny. Basic material. Around that time, because they were losing light at night now, no starlight, no moonlight, and monsoon time coming, they set up poles around Meherabad, high poles, and they got specific lanterns. This is the first time they had these special lanterns brought, and they would hoist these up. These were their street lights at Meherabad during the night after it became dark.
They were not electric
No, nothing like that. These were actually kerosene lamps under pressure, a different type of a early kerosene lamp. On the 13th, Gulmai was cleaning the ceiling of the post office. There were some birds in there, some insects. She was cleaning with a broom and slipped off the table she was standing on and badly sprained her ankle at the post office. Baba took very good care of her, put the dressing on her ankle, but because of this, he delayed the beginning of his silence. So that went on, postponed. More sports programs. I wanted to read this thing. Of course, the crowds were increasing constantly. Now the word was out, Baba was going to begin silence. And even though they heard it was a year, people didn't want to miss the chance of hearing him again. To have the opportunity to have a conversation with him or to hear him sing, they didn't want to miss that. So crowds were beginning to increase even more now. On the 15th, this was written. Now this is Pandava Deshmukh's diary. No, I think this is Ajaba still. This is Ajaba still. The daily bhajans by the boys are getting more and more interesting every day under Arjun's leadership. Baba's personal participation therein tonight gave enhanced charm to the divine recitations, so much so that all began to dance to the tune out of enthusiasm for a long time. The discussions went on. On the 25th, they had a sports program, which included different things. A donkey race, Very entertaining. Baba won the donkey race, of course. It was as entertaining for the participants as the spectators. That would happen. That donkey race happened on the east side of the hospital right there. So there were discussions leading up to Baba's now planned silence. He had meetings with the Mandali. They were discussing the logistics of this, and some of them were concerned. They openly expressed their feelings to Baba. You sometimes become so irritated with us and you shout out. Will you be able to control your speech? Baba assured them that he would do it. Some of them even thought maybe you should just tie something on your mouth so you won't slip. Not necessary, Baba said. It will be. That's when Pandava asked Baba the question, and if you're silent, Master, how will you teach us? And he made that statement, I have come not to teach, but to awaken. It was the end of June 1925. So there were boards set up on the 26th, informing the public that July 1st would be the last day. Actually, June 30th would be the last day, and from July 1st there would be no public interviews. So the crowds were even bigger for the next few days, because Baba wanted to focus for that period from July 1st till silence on the organization and coaching of all the different departments at Meherabad and the Mandali in general. He was very intent upon them being mentally focused, being responsible for their different departments and work, and being attentive, diligent. It was never good enough. It was never good enough. On the last day, the public day, not the last day before silence, but the public day, Baba also went around Arangaon, and he determined that there are too many families that are in such poverty that they can't get above the threshold. So he arranged for them to have specific rations for the coming year so that they would be helped. Clothes, grain, to lift them up just a little bit so that they could have a sense of a possibility of getting out of that hopelessness. Baba ordered more lamps and grinding wheels, and Baba and 10 of the men took shifts to grind grain then. He assigned 2 hours to Baidul, 2 hours to so-and-so, and 2 hours, each of them got different sailor, each of them got different time allotments. Baba himself would take anywhere from half an hour to 2+ hours, depending on the specific day and what he wanted to do that day. One of the last things Baba did is gathered the boys with him at the Jopti, telling him, this is your chance, confess your sins. Openly confess your sins. And they confessed different things they had done. And Baba said, I forgive you. Don't do it again. And he gave them, a lecture on purity of character, the importance of honesty in life, things like that. On July 9th, general orders were posted around Meherabad, different points, especially at the hospital and the school, so that people would understand what was happening. Baba was on silence for a year, was going to be from the next day. Baba made 5 men responsible for different departments, different things. Rustam was assistant superintendent. Behramji was superintendent. Padri was in charge of the hospital then. Arjun and Vishnu were in the school departments. So they were the only 5 people who were allotted any time of the day with notice an opportunity to communicate with Baba. Otherwise, every other resident of Meherabad had the order that you don't speak unless Baba calls you. You don't approach him for conversation. It was an order. Baba summoned the parents of all the students on this day, July 9th, in that afternoon, and gave them all a lecture. I'm going to be keeping silence for 1 year. You have to give me your promise. You're not going to interfere with the work at the school. Remember what I've asked you to do. And be faithful. You have given them a commitment to improve themselves. Allow us to do it. Baba went to the women's ashram that afternoon and told them, I want you to continue feeding the school. Their job was making about 500 chapatis a day at this point, plus bakri, for the schoolboys. They cooked the rice and dal for the lunch. And Baba said, I want you to continue serving the school children with all your heart. Don't think they're just jungly villagers. Treat them as if they are your own children, your own family. And actually, remember, when you're feeding them, you're actually feeding me. So that was their direction. That evening, Baba gave a discourse at front of the school to all the people gathered there. There were many women. Gulmai was there, though. It was mostly to the men mandali. There were 3 parts to this discourse. It was the purpose of the silence. 1, Baba said, first, it's for my work. It's for my work in the world. It's for helping the circle, the work of realization of the circle, number 2. And number 3, he said, is for the future. Humanity has to be lifted up. There will be great suffering in the world, wars, natural disasters. It will be so bad there will be rivers of blood. And Padri used to remember this comment. Baba turned to Gulmai and he said, this is in Gujarati, but the translation is, you know, Baba used to wear that kerchief on his head. He said, I will dip my kerchief in that river of blood and tie it around my head. Not until the world cries out for God will I give up my silence. Pretty extreme statement. Baba said good night to the men. Last advice, walk to the Jopti with Masaji. Masaji was his attendant at the time. The last advice Baba had given the men was that, remember now, whenever you go out at night, keep a lantern with you. We have a lot of snakes around Meherabad. That's an order. I can help you with anything, but if you get bitten by a snake, it's over. So Baba went to the Jopti with Masaji, and Padri said, I went out to Piddle next to the road. I had the lamp, as Baba has said, and there I see a cobra. So I shout. He said all the other men came running with their sticks, clobbered the snake. Baba heard the shout. He came out with Masaji again from the Jopti and came up to the men and said, "What's happened?" Padre said, "There was a snake." Baba said, "You had the lantern?" He said, "Yes, Baba." "See? Right. Remember, be attentive and follow my instructions." Padre said, and I handed the snake was still squirming there, Padre said, I handed this staff to Baba and he just leaned on this head of the snake with the staff and just finished him off. After that, Baba went back to the women and said, "You're very lucky because there was a snake out here. I have come back to see you one last time before I start silence." So a few more minutes of chit-chat and Baba went in. He woke up the next day keeping silence. The Mandali thought silence means he's going to be reclusive, uninvolved. He was so particular about all these details to us that he must be planning to be out of the picture. But on the contrary, Baba was even more attentive, doing all of his usual daily inspections in each department, hospital, school, cooking, everything, examining each boy. The only difference was now he had one of the young disciples, Bal, his name was, following him around with this sack of slates and chalk. That was Baba's way of communicating in general. He wouldn't be using paper, wasting paper. Paper was for the school. It was slates and chalk. Slates and chalk was also from the school. This was the common, you've seen it in our time, that children in India use a slate and chalk to do their lessons on. So Baba would use those slates, that size slate, to write a message on. And so Bal, this young guy who followed him around, his responsibility was, after the slates were read, to collect them, clean them, and put them back in a pile so Baba could continue using these. Generally, there were just a few slates, but if Baba was giving a discourse, then there would be a bigger pile of slates so that it could go on and they wouldn't run short of slates. But generally, there were at least 3. And this is how Baba would communicate. The day after the 10th, Baba did get aggravated and walked away from Meherabad when one of the Mandali slipped up in their duties. And what he would usually do when he got aggravated is walk out of Meherabad and sit in one of these trees towards Amanagar, usually, under the shade of one of these trees, either one of these or one of the ones that continued way down the road, sometimes as far as a mile away. That day, Baba was aggravated, and even though the Mandali approached him, they got close and he threatened he's going to throw stones at them. Stay away. Eventually, after time, he came back as if nothing had happened. This would happen more than once. Baba would give them a lesson by walking away, and they would go in a group and plead, "Please forgive us again, Baba. We're so sorry. We'll try again." He would forgive them. Yeah, let's go to that slide of Baba in 1925. Baba had stopped shaving in 1925. I think you might be, you're on the wrong one there. You should be back on 2. There it is. Give us this one here. Baba had stopped shaving when he came to Meherabad in 1925. And this is one of the most well-known photographs we have of Baba taken during that period. So, about 3 days after Baba started silence, the Mandali noticed that Baba was spending time in the Jopti in the mornings for some hours. And they came to find out that he was writing a book there. And though they expected the discourses to end, actually, now that Baba was keeping silence in some period of seclusion in the Jopti, when he was out, he was given he was giving even more explanations, beginning to give random explanations about different, as they would say, divine subjects in the evenings mostly. But sometimes, every Thursday, one of Baba's devotees, Kakashane, had rented a bungalow in Arangan, on the Meherabad side of Arangan, and Baba would go there for tea. And the Mandali would accompany him there. They would get, once a week, tea with milk in it. So they would go and have milk tea, and Baba would give them discourses, sometimes for several hours. And they were fascinated with these explanations, telling them things they'd never heard before. On the 23rd of July, Baba's attendant Bal, who used to carry the sack around, overslept. And to take his place, Baba called Louis Charles Nelms, who was the first Western disciple of Baba's. He had seen Baba at a darshan program at the end of 1923 in Bombay. And he realized who Baba was. He had an inner experience, and he wanted to come and stay with Baba. Baba saw him again in Pune during the previous months and promised that he would allow him to come. So the previous month, in June that is, when Baba returned from Bombay, he allowed Nelms to also join the ashram. Nelms was particular that Nelms wanted to be one of the Mandali, and he didn't want any special treatment. So he ate with the Mandali, the same diet. He dressed like them, and Pendu said he made one mistake. Why didn't he wear shoes? There was a well. They were doing a project in the well across the street. Ramju had asked Baba to allow them to start digging a well because there was always a water problem at Meherabad, and the crowds were increasing. So they had begun digging the well across between the road and the railway tracks. During that work, Nelms had injured his foot, cut his foot, and it became infected. But on this day, Nelms was Baba's attendant. Baba allowed him to be his attendant till the afternoon, when Bal came and after tea and pleaded with Baba, forgive him, and so Baba took Bal back, and Nelms was relieved from the duty. After that, the next day, Nelms' condition began to get even worse. And Baba became ill the next day with fever and backache through the day. But Baba kept on with his routine. Baba would say, it's not a medical thing. He would always, when he would get these illnesses, it has nothing to do with medical problems. Nelms, on the other hand, continued to get worse and worse. And on the 25th, Baba was doing his inspection of the hospital. He came again that evening. He would see Nelms several times a day. He came that evening. Padri and Pendu were standing there. Nelms' bed was in the one place along the wall. And he told them, don't worry. By tomorrow morning, you'll be perfectly fine. But Baba had given them a lecture that previous day. And the theme of it was that you all should be ready to die for me. And as Baba had said, the next morning, Nelms was perfectly fine. He died about 5 a.m. of septicemia. So his body was taken to Ahmednagar. Baba sent a contingent of the Mandali there with his body. Make sure you don't leave until his body is in the ground and buried. They had to stay there through the day. Rustam was in charge of the registration and all the things that had to happen specifically for a European person. Baba fasted the whole day, waiting until they got back to Meherabad later in the evening. And then he gave an explanation to them that Nelms is not really dead. His body is gone, but his mind is very much alive, and he'll come to me again very soon. So that first Western disciple of Baba's lasted 36 days before he died. There was an issue about Pandava, who was a teacher Pandava Deshmukh was a teacher with the high caste boys who were mixed with the girls. But later that month, he brought Baba's attention to an issue. He said, I don't think it's a good idea to have the boys and the girls studying together here. So Baba said, yes, we'll get a new site for the girls. Instead of getting a new site for the girls, though, Baba took the opportunity to use that as an excuse to put the high caste boys in with the low caste boys together. So on August 6th, he abolished the caste separation in the boys' school, and he moved all the high caste boys to the regular Hazrat Babajan school. The girls were kept there then in the south half of the main hall of the main bungalow there, of the old bungalow. We call it the main at the time. Okay. So, after that, it was important that the school had to be enlarged again. So this was the first major enlargement of the school. At that point, Baba did the groundbreaking ceremony by taking a bar and digging the corner posts for that enlargement himself at the school there. And on that day in the afternoon, suddenly there was a severe rain. Gulmai was at Meherabad. They were sitting there on the post office veranda. Baba suddenly said, "Where's Behramji and Ajuba?" And he became like he was frantic, running around Meherabad in the rain, staying in the rain, looking in obvious places where they weren't, till he found them in the bathroom and brought them both back. They were all soaking wet. They dried off. Baba, with fresh clothes, took Rustam's jacket, sat down next to Gulmai and said, made the gesture, "Rustam has fallen." Didn't know what that meant. Anyway, the day went on. The next day, Rustam got back. He wasn't there at Meherabad. So Rustam got back and narrated this incident. He was driving one of the buses of the Sarosh Motor Works Company, and he came across. They had a bus. They owned buses, and they had a transport company. It wasn't a public thing then. It was a private bus company. He said he had to cross a river, and he thought he could cross it, but halfway there, the bus got stalled, and the water was suddenly rising. So he thought he'd just step out and see what the problem was, and as soon as he stepped out, he lost his footing and almost got washed away. He was just able to grab the fender before being washed away, and then after a few minutes, some of the men in the bus could pull him in, and he barely missed drowning in that flood. He explained that story. This happened what time? All around the same time. The rain happened at Meherabad, and Baba then put on the coat and said, "Rustam has fallen." On the 20th, for an example, in the Combined Diaries, they describe, talking about these lectures Baba would give on Thursdays and Sundays. Baba was giving a talk there at Kakashane's. For 3.5 hours, he discoursed, writing. Subjects, light and darkness, the yogas. And that day also, it was an interesting thing. There was another trial at Meherabad.
Peter, some people have requested 5-minute break just to
I'm sorry, Kanlana. Okay. We'll get back to the trial just after your break.
5-minute break.
5. I mentioned to you the entry in the combined diary that Baba gave a discourse for 3.5 hours that day in writing. This is from the group of, you call it a manuscript. I don't know if it's exactly what we would call a manuscript, but it's written in hand, so we call it that. This is from what was published as the book In God's Hand. Why it is so very important to me is that it is the only example we have left of how Baba gave a discourse during those years by writing. That was a period of 17 months, and this is an example. And this is typically how Baba would give. You can see he took a whole sheet of paper and he quickly wrote on it all of this stuff. And this matches the subject matter of the entry of the combined diary that day where Baba talked about light and darkness. Although this part doesn't have anything about the yogas, we have light and darkness. And since the title on the manuscript was 1925, my best guess is that it was this day, August 20th. It may or may not have been. But you can see some of the subjects there. Here's light and darkness, real darkness, unnatural, natural, all that. And this is also typical of what Baba would do. He would add parentheses, do lines, cross out things, put arrows, X's. This is how somebody who communicates by writing communicates, and instead of what Baba would do is make sure that every person would understand what the subject was, and if they weren't grasping it and they wanted to, Baba would patiently explain to them what it was. He would do that sometimes not by rewriting the whole thing, but by crossing something out, making an arrow, doing an X. So this was not a manuscript per se to be a rough draft for publication. This is an example of how Baba used to communicate a discourse. This would usually happen in the chalk and slate way. But for some reason, this day, Baba used paper. Much to our benefit, now we have the example of that. So that happened on that day. What else happened on that day is this. There was a complaint against Vishnu. Vishnu was passing notes to a woman. So the court was again set up. At the school, Vishnu is on trial. Prosecution, defense. Baba's the judge. State the charges. Vishnu was passing a note to the woman. What is the rule? He's violated the rule. Baba says he's guilty. He's guilty. I passed the sentence. 11 months, you will not have my darshan. But the rest of the Mandali as a group, Baba said, anybody say anything? They said, he is guilty, Baba, but we'll pardon the sentence if you don't mind. Because why? Guilty with reason. What Vishnu was doing was passing a note to Naja about the volume of meals required for the school. That's all it was. And if he didn't do it, there was nobody else to do it, then they wouldn't come. If it was short, both Vishnu and Naja would have been in hot water. It was about the logistics of running the school. No words, just here's how strict Baba was. Keeping them separate, how strict he was. And Baba wasn't going to really do anything, but through this whole drama, he again gave them the importance of his directions and the obedience to his rules. So that drama went on that day. We'll go back to, let's see, we'll just keep this here for a minute. Sunset the next day. Baba wanted all the Mandali to fast. The news had come that Tajuddin Baba had dropped his body. And so in his honor, Baba wanted all the mandali to fast for 24 hours beginning the next day. So they did that. The following day, during their fast, the people doing just fasting from food, it wasn't an issue. But for those people who were addicted to tobacco products, it was a problem. So around noon, they were just fidgeting, and Baba went around, gave each of them a beedi or a cigarette who wanted one, who were really in bad straits, or something to chew, and said, once, now don't even think about it till after sunset. But in consideration of their addiction, he allowed them to have that. Yes. To get by that fast, one of the things they did to pass the time was play gramophone records. So the gramophone had become a big feature at Meherabad too. They would play gramophone records. And they had records of Qawwali music, other types of music, Western songs, different things. Baba would listen to these. The mandali would listen to those things and enjoy that. One day during that time, during one of their tea discourses, Baba revealed to the mandali that Christ did not die on the cross. That he actually, in Padri's words, since he was stationed as the avatar, as Christ, he was stationed on the fourth plane to work those powers. And he didn't die, he stopped his body. Padri's term was, he put his body in a state of yogic suspended animation for 3 days. And after he came out of that, he, after some time, walked to India with Thaddeus and Bartholomew. This is all what Baba had explained. During that time, he revealed that. He also talked about, during that time, Shivaji, the life of Shivaji, and told them, revealed to them that he was Shivaji, and many of them were around with him when he was Shivaji. He said so many of them have come back and are playing prominent roles today. Now let's go to the next image. This was taken later, but this is a shot of Baba near the Babajan school. In early September, late August, actually, there was a sign put above the Jopti Garden Gate, Meherabad, there for the first time. So that sign was up there. And there was also a group of people who were staying, so they had people in what was first a rudimentary dharamshala, and then during that period they built a 30 by 30 foot building near the well. It was right here. You can't see this. In this vicinity right here, to accommodate pilgrims, mostly poor pilgrims. That was called the dharamshala. These 2 bathrooms were built on the water channel behind that dharamshala that had been put in to irrigate Jopti Garden and the orchard there to the south. So Baba had one of the men mandali. His name was Erez Shah, but he was Zoroastrian Irani who had the habit of praying, so he got the nickname Peshotan, which is gradually shortened to Pesu. But his work was bathing the poor pilgrims who stayed in the dharamshala. And Baba said, you give them the bath. I'll be washing them internally while you wash them externally. Well, now we've put the sign here. People know this is Meherabad. Now we have the responsibility. They have to know and understand that Meherabad is the place for cleaning. And they clean themselves here, internally, as they're being cleaned externally. So Pesu took this duty of bathing these poor pilgrims at the dharamshala. And Baba would inspect and, of course, invariably find some defect in Pesu's work. And like the other mandali, he did his best. And every time he tried, Baba found fault. So one day he was determined, as Pendu in the hospital, that he's going to do it just right. So there was one old man he gave a bath to, and he was just sure, everything. He checked, not a speck of soap, not a drop, everything was just right. And Baba came and inspected, and Baba looked at him like this and reached behind the old man's ear, and 2 drops of water. Baba gestured. You want to give what? You're trying to give the old man pneumonia? And Pesu was shocked. And the old man also was shocked. I've never had such a bath in my life. My mother, as a baby, never washed me this clean. So this was how particular Baba was about every bit of service at Meherabad. At the same time then, during that month, because the Mandali had been staying at this point now anywhere they could find shelter, verandas at night, anywhere, they built what was called Makan Nikas, House of the Chosen. And that was here. We can go to the map if you want. Now if you have that map there.
Which map? The
1925 and 6 again?
this one?
No. No. Okay. Anyway, that's not important. Let's go back to the picture of Baba. The Makanikas was also there, and it was
1929.
no. That's just let's go back to program 2 and follow the next. We'll go back to that image again. That's okay. Yes. So the Makanikas was opened on September 20th, I believe it was. Baba assigned spots for each of the Mandali on the right and left, and there was a seat for him in the Makanikas rear center. So he would also then meet with the Mandali. They would eat there. It was their place. Around that time, Baba was staying in the Jopdi trying to do his writing work there 4 hours a day on average, and he didn't want to be disturbed. There was an issue that with some of the untouchables following Baba's orders and Arangan were given trouble by the other people who expected them to continue with the duties that nobody else would do, and now they had Baba's orders and they weren't dealing with animal hides, doing anything like that. Baba made an arrangement that they should, if they came across a dead animal, they had permission to skin the animal but bury the carcass. And the animal hide had to be delivered to Baba, who would pay them for it. So instead of all of these people taking advantage of them, Baba became the middleman for them, making it fair and clean. So that was the understanding, and they were supposed to abide by this. But there were other, what they considered, benefits from the higher caste, considerations from the higher caste people who now threatened to withdraw these things, which were traditional habits that really had nothing to do with equality. So they came to Baba and complained, and there was a big argument in the village, and one morning about 70 of these people showed up outside Baba's Jopti to have him hear the case, because Baba was the ultimate judge. He often was mediating cases. We didn't get into any of this history, but the diary is full of cases where Baba would end up mediating arguments, fights, police cases with the people of Arangan. So this morning, 70 of them show up, and if you know people from Arangan, they don't really know what quiet means. They have 2 volumes on and loud. I mean off and loud. So It was often loud, and it was off, so it was loud outside of Baba's jopti one morning while he's trying to work, and there was no question of him ignoring that. They weren't aware of it, it was their way, but he had to come out and deal with the situation. He settled the whole thing. He would teach them in a very specific, calm way to follow a logical train of thought and eliminate all of these notions and peculiar superstitions and things from their processes. That's the way Baba would deal with their problems, very logically, and he would solve the thing for them. But it was becoming obvious that the Jopti garden, with the increased crowds and all of these people coming, and the security around the Jopti was always compromised. That is, the quiet security around the Jopti. So Baba around that time also wanted to make something new for himself to stay in. So he had Ajuba, the old carpenter, start building something for him near the post office. It was kind of a portable camper of the time. It was a building about this high, 16 feet long, 6 feet wide, let's say inside, large enough inside so that Baba could sit, squatting, and write. He used to write on this small table in the Jopti. So he could sit on the ground, on the floor, and write on this table. That table you may have seen in the museum at Meherabad. That's how he wrote the book, on that table. So he wanted a space big enough that he could be comfortably in there to lie down or sit and write.
What was his light source there?
Inside,
Yes.
it was only a kerosene lamp.
Okay.
That was it. That was it. So this thing was being constructed. While Bob was continuing his writing work, he didn't want the noise of construction. So that construction happened near the post office, on the path near the post office. That is what came to be known as the table cabin. At first, it didn't have plank boards on the sides. It had woven bamboo panels around the sides. And we'll see a photograph of that coming up soon. Dasara was the end of that month. Dasara was another Hindu festival, and Arjun, who had enthusiastically brought all the people together to do these celebrations, got Baba's permission to have him take part in another thing that they really enjoyed, which was a ceremonial bath. So Baba would have to come in the morning and sit in his bathroom, specially decorated for the occasion, and tolerate the onslaught of people giving him a ceremonial bath. He would sit there in his shorts, and people would take a tumbler of water, pour perfumes, take a few seconds to scrub his body, and whoever was there, the residents, the crowd, everybody would want to take part in this. It was considered a very rare and auspicious thing to do, so Baba would tolerate this for some time. This was like the beginning of the ceremonial baths this year. That happened at the end of the month in September. The table cabin was moved to the tree in front, next to the road, in front of the of the Jopti garden on the 4th of October, and Baba began sitting there during the day to write. One week later, he also began sleeping there on the 11th of October, and he began fasting. And while he was doing that fasting, this time he engaged 40 plus members of the Mandali to also fast. Now, when he started fasting back in the previous June, he was fasting. The program was eating once a day And that could only be in a window from 3 in the afternoon till 8 at night.
When he was doing, when he was in seclusion, somebody
Hmm?
would have been actually guarding, right, outside. What about in this table? So when Baba used to be there in the table, somebody will be guarding also?
Yes, but his writing time was specifically from 8 a.m. to 12 noon. So during that time, he passed an order. Nobody was to come within 100 feet of that tree near there. And he would station some of the mandali around to prevent people from coming close. Even they would go to the point of, Baba was so serious about having that quiet time there, and it had to be at that point because that's where he wanted it, for whatever his reason was, even to the point of diverting traffic to the other side of the road. He was very serious about that. So Baba engaged 40 plus members of the Mandali to also fast with him on particular days. He fasted every day. Each of them would have to fast. This work, he said, was specifically for the circle people, realizing the circle people. All of this work during the first long stay, he was really focusing on the circle, realization circle. Going way back, it was all part of the first work of any avataric advent is to get that circle engaged and work for the realization. The first responsibility of the avatar as a master is to realize the circle. Once that happens, the ramifications go out. But his personal responsibility is the realization of the circle, and these early years of the Advent is when that happens. So we engaged 40 plus of the Mandali on different days doing that fast, as they had been doing with the 1 meal a day routine. Some of them had to fast personally only on milk for those periods. Another thing Baba was doing with that fast, the reason he said, I have to fast because it aids me in this internal breathing, inverse breathing I need to do, backwards breathing. Ulat, or what I think was the word for it. Inverse breathing. He said, I have to breathe in a reverse way. And this particular thing, inverse breathing, is to clean the yogic sanskars of the mandali. The most difficult to extricate, the yogic sanskars. Because the yogas that they had done were the things that got into their psyche that advanced them. But now they had to be extricated. So Baba said specifically this inverse breathing was to clean the yogic sanskars of the circle. So one night, could have been that night, but one night, for entertainment, Baba gave the order after their supper. Tonight, everyone lectures. So this was a typical thing. Baba started with lectures. So each of them would give lectures. Some were natural speakers and some were nervous speakers. But it was the beginning of having them stand up and have the courage to speak out in a very simple way. Now Diwali happens after Dasara. And there were 2 other festivals. So now suddenly Arjun and his enthusiasm, Baba has had 3 of these ceremonial baths, and he caught cold. And he told Arjun, please, that's enough now with these ceremonial baths. It's affected his health. So they laid off with this business of ceremonial baths. Baba suffered for the first week or so of November with a very severe bronchitis and cough from this bath. business. The girls' school was finally then shifted out of the bungalow where the hospital was because the hospital needed to expand. So that's when they shifted the girls' school to Arangaon, to some of the buildings in the family quarters there. On the 10th, there were some rains that year, but they were sporadic, not continuous. And essentially, they were facing famine again if they didn't get rains. So on November 10th, there was some music program at Meherabad, but the villagers came during that day, and Baba told them to stay, eat with them that evening. And then they stayed late, and suddenly Baba said, late at night, dig a pit. They dug some of the Mandali dug a pit, some of them brought firewood, some of them brought the little articles they have for puja and arti, or a fire, sandalwood, incense, that kind of a thing. That pit was dug just to the north in front of the table house. Table house now had been set, as I said, in the shade of that neem tree that was just before the Jopti garden. So that night at 11 o'clock, they lit the dooni. Baba had the Arangaon villagers who had come to ask him for rain, sing bhajans for a while. Different things happened. Suddenly Baba said, time to leave. Everybody got up, but the habit was you pay respects to him before you leave, and those who lingered didn't make it home before the downpour hit them. So that time, after the first dooni was lit, it rained for 15 hours straight. So much so that the school had to be canceled the next day. So instead of the school classes and doing other things, Baba had all the Mandali gather in the schoolhouse, Babajan school. And the work for the day was compose poetry on the dooni. So each of the Mandali composed poetry. We still have some of those poems from the early disciples that day. That day, Baba also composed his poem on the dooni, and that is the one that has been translated and is read on every 12th of the month at the dooni now. So there was a famous Kawal in India. His name was Pyaru. I don't know if you've heard of Pyaru Kawal, an old famous Kawal from that time. He wasn't the most famous at the time until he sang for Baba, and then he became the most famous. But he was called on the 27th. He came and sang at Meherabad for Baba and the Mandali. The hospital was cleared out that morning. All the patients in their beds were put in all the various residences around Meherabad, and all the space was cleared. They set down rugs and prepared the place for the concert, the old bungalow there. Of course, there wasn't enough space for all the people who came. They were out into the verandas and outside to hear this quite well-known, very fine singer, and to see Baba's reaction. The Mandali all unanimously agreed it was by far the best Qawwali they had ever heard. Baba really enjoyed it, and Pyara Qawwal really enjoyed it. That was the 27th. The crowds were growing and growing. 2 days later was one of those big days again. Thousands of people would come. The problem was, on these special days, when they would have thousands of people there, the crowd would block the road. There would be so many people around Baba's table cabin where his seat was. And now there was the dooni there with Baba, and there would be these thousands of people in a crowd. So that evening, about 7 o'clock, Baba walked across the road over here and broke ground in one of these corners here for a building. He wanted it 99 feet long, north and south, and 66 feet wide, east to west. A gathering place that would be large enough for the crowds on any average day. That was there. Still wasn't enough for the crowds on a Thursday or a Sunday, but at least on an average day, they could hold the people who were coming. At the same time then that month, if we could find that map, I don't know if you can find that map of 1926, but I'll just continue right here. At the same time then that month, you can see if you can find it. I'm not sure you can find it there. It's 1925-26.
And Peter,
Yes,
that was Sidar Bar you're talking about?
Sidar Bar.
This map?
That's it. Okay. So this was the building Baba laid out, which he named by the end of December Sidar Bar in honor of his master Sai Baba. This is the Hazrat Babajan school, but by now it's been expanded in this direction. Over here. Or over here. The first expansion may have been here, but this may not be exactly. The first school may have been here. It's a little bigger than this, and the expansion was here. There was another expansion here later. But you have the general idea. Makani Khas is here. Now along the road here, Baba had given somebody the previous month permission to sell flowers and prasad here and a quick shop so that the pilgrims coming could purchase that stuff and have it. This month he allowed other people to set up shops. In the meantime, there was the tailor shop here and the store that was run by Daulat Mai and Gustaji. Now Gustaji, up until Baba was keeping silence at least, was the only man who was allowed to speak to only a few of the women, because he was a very pure character and one of the old disciples, the most revered disciple of Baba at the time. So Gustaji and Daulat Mai ran the stores together, and that they were the link to supplying the Mandali on both sides. That storeroom and tailor shop were in this area right here, near that tree by the post office path, which is still there. So other shops were set up here along the road on this side, right here. And there were a couple of people who set up tea shops even. There were other flower shops. These tea shops were nothing but really poor canvas walls, some bamboos, some really poor benches, planks on bricks, cups and saucers all chipped. One day anyway, Baba took the Mandali walking through the new town of Meherabad, the colony of Meherabad. He referred to it as the colony. And he bought tea for the Mandali there at these tea shops. So that's when one he named Taj Mahal and the other tea shop Raj Mahal. By this time, there were maybe not 500 residents, but probably over 400 by this time. Within 2 more months, there were 500 residents. Just residents, not to mention the visitors on Thursdays and Sundays especially.
And the Arangaon people, it doesn't include the Arangaon villages.
Not including Arangaon people. Now Baba had some of his disciples who actually relocated and lived in Arangaon. Bapu Gante from Pune this year moved to Arangaon and lived there for the rest of his life, for an example.
It's a big population, still, 400 people.
Yes, logistics were a problem. We're coming up to that now soon, the real challenge for logistics at that time.
But where were these people staying? Because all this used for Baba's work. So where are their quarters?
This is not everything. There were some huts here. There were more family quarters here. There were huts all around. There were other things, not in here in the orchard, but there were some things over here. There were different things.
And where is the post office building?
The post office is right here. That is this building here. Okay.
And the MPC is where the orchard was?
The MPC now is about right here.
So the MPC's front yard is the orchard.
The front yard was the extent of the orchard, yes. Right. That area right in front. So, during that Christmas, Baba celebrated the Christmas too, and he wanted the Mandali to stay up till midnight to celebrate the birth of Christ. So to keep awake again on that Christmas, he had the Mandali each give lectures. Give interesting lectures so people won't fall asleep. We have to stay up till midnight. And the last one was Ajabat, the Christian disciple, the old man who had a beard, coming in dramatically, wearing a robe and carrying a cross. And he gave a lecture about the life of Christ and how he was born, Christmas, and how it was. And that happened on that Christmas. Now, during that Christmas vacation, for the first time, the Satta family in Ahmednagar had become close to Baba during the previous year, 1924. They first met Baba and they became close to Baba. And Baba, rather than going to Kushru quarters, Baba would go to their home where he was welcome when he went to Ahmednagar in those early years. So their family became interested and dedicated to him. The sister who lived in Nagpur, Gai Mai, with her family, came for the first time to meet Meher Baba on the Christmas vacation this year, 1925. So Erich described that first meeting for him. He was 9 years old. They took Tongas out to Meherabad to meet Baba, and Gai Mai, the way she was so always, her nature was to be very considerate. But they had all loaded onto one Tonga, and as they were approaching Meherabad, she could see that Baba was sitting near the dooni here, right here. Baba was sitting at the table house near the dooni. There was a veranda kind of a thing that was made off the front of the table house. And there was a little platform under there, and Baba's Gadi would be set on that platform. That's where he would sit, near the dooni, and people would come and meet him there if he wasn't in the side Darbar, which was not built yet. So there was still only the dooni there during those years. Side Darbar was not completed, I should say. It was still under construction, not quite completed. So Baba was still over here while that work was being done. And the Jasawalas came for the first time on the Tonga here. And as they got close, Gai Mai saw that Baba was there, and she thought Baba might think we're cruel to this poor animal overloading the horse. So Erich said, well, I was a stout boy, so she thought I should jump off and lessen the load on the horse. So she told me to jump, and I jumped down and fell and scraped my elbow. At 9 years old, he said, it was bleeding and I was crying. So they had all come and met Baba, and here comes Erich wandering behind, holding his elbow, crying. And Baba picks him out, calls him, says, what's wrong? And so Erich says, well, I fell down, hurt my elbow. So Baba takes his kerchief and puts it on, and takes dooni ash and puts it on Erich's elbow. And Erich sat there. Baba held him on his lap. He said, Baba is so loving. He says, I'm looking around at the faces. There are my family there, other people. They're all looking at Baba. I'm looking at Baba. He's a beautiful person. How can he love me so much? More than my own mother. Made a great impression. That's his first meeting with Baba. After that Christmas, Baba started a new thing. Let's go to the next image. I think we'll put this down now and go to the next image. We're missing a couple of images here. Let's go back to back to 2. Okay. You're going to go to the next image, please. This is a rare photograph of Baba sitting in that front section of the table house. You can see, you know how the door is on the right side. This is the door. It was made of this woven, what we call chatya, this design of woven bamboo, split bamboo. This is the rail. You see that rail there? Remember the 2 rails on the side? So Baba's got his elbow resting on the rail. This is how Baba looked when the Jessawalas came during their Christmas vacation. This is the kerchief that Baba would be wearing, that he took off his head to put on Erich's elbow. That's the way it was.
So that a table is half like covered on the walls, but half the walls are not covered.
Do you remember what it looks like?
Yeah.
So the back section was, this section here we're looking at was probably originally only 4 feet, but within a day or two Baba wanted it expanded, so it became about 5 or 5.5 feet long instead. It was all chatya at the time, so it wasn't difficult for them to do that. The floor was expanded. And the front was left open to give a shaded veranda. And the idea was that a certain number of men at any time could pick this thing up and carry it wherever Baba wanted. They could put it on a lorry, on a truck and drive it somewhere. It was Baba's early camper design. That's what it was. It was portable, his portable cabin to go wherever he wanted to go. Let's go to the next image, please. This is a rare photograph of Baba in the Mandali during this period in the Dharamshala. Here's that man, Ajuba, the old man, right here. Ajuba. Gangaram Pawar from Arangan. Baba nicknamed him Ajuba. Old man, it's like a venerable old man. This is Kakashane, who was there. Padri Kakushrasari. Gulab Shah, sailor. Kodu, who became sailor during that time. Vishnu. This is Arjun Supikar. We don't have that many photos of him, but this is really good. And because we know this is the first long stay because Arjun is still alive here. Pendu is here. Syed Seb is here. Chanji is in there somewhere. Jal, Baba's brother Jal is here's Abdur Rahman Ghani's brother, the singer. That's him. And some of these other people are here. Kisan and some of the other. Bal is there. Different ones. Anyway, this is a good photograph, a rare photograph. And it's the only photograph we have of Baba at this site, the old Dharamshala of the time. During that following month, there was an incident here in the Dharamshala with a man and a woman, something, and Baba said, we have to split this up. The men and the women can't be staying, even the Dharamshala is open. There was some issue. So that's why there was a new section built to the northwest of the well right here, another 30 by 30, which came to be known as Upasani Sarai. It was a Dharamshala for women. This was to the north of the well, just to the north of the well. Upasani Sarai was to the south and slightly east of the well. They were both near the well. On December 11th, Baba formed a thing called the Circle Committee. A number of the Mandali were members of the Circle Committee. And they were to deal with the day-to-day logistics and the problems of the colony of Meherabad in general. So that was established on that day. And also on that day, now what had happened is since the crowds were increasing so much, Baba had first, a few months previous, delegated Behramji to screen all the people who wanted interviews because they were taking too much of his time with petty issues. So Behramji was to use his discretion and make sure Baba only heard the important points. Otherwise, there was no end to it. By this point, there were too many people. So along with Behramji, Rustam was also delegated on that day to screen these people. So that first, if they wanted an interview with Baba, they would have to see one of them first, discuss what the issue was. That would be written down to Baba, passed if they couldn't speak to him directly, or at least they would make notes, this person's name is such and such, they want to speak to you about this such and such. So Baba wouldn't spend his endless hours being involved in the petty issues of every person who came. On the 7th, there was a boy from the school who had pneumonia. Baba was very concerned. After a few days, the boy got better. There was then a tea party given for Dr. Karkal, Padri, and Pendu in honor of the boy's survival. But whenever these boys would become sick, Baba would be at the hospital every hour, every half hour, checking specifically on their case to see if they were very concerned about the boys. It was an indication of what would come in the coming years when he increased even more his focus on his work with the boys. One day there was a lawyer who came to Meherabad. He was a lawyer who had retired and become a sadhu, sannyasi. So being a lawyer and a sannyasi, he wanted to ask Baba questions about spirituality, but being a lawyer, he was very careful about it. He didn't want to be kind of talked around or tricked. So he came to interview Baba to see if Baba was authentic, but his approach was, if you don't mind, I'd like to write down my questions. He wanted to make sure his questions were properly stated like a lawyer would do, so that there was no squirming out, so this Meher Baba couldn't find some way to talk around it and squirm away from the answer. Baba indicated, "You're most welcome," and he gave him a slate or two to write his questions on. And he said, sit there. This happened maybe at the Makkan, I forget. So the lawyer sat in a corner writing his questions. In the meantime, Baba was going about his business, and he was also writing on the slate and answering questions with people. And when the lawyer had his questions ready, he said, "Shri, I have got my questions to present to you." And Baba said, "Okay, thank you." And he was silent. At the same time, Baba simultaneously gave him the slates that he had written on, which were all the answers to the questions that the lawyer had written down. So the Mandali, they were used to Baba with them occasionally doing something to show them his all-knowing nature, but it was rare that he would, to somebody outside, let them see that. And Baba's answer was, I had the whim to read the man's mind today. So I think Ajiba was still writing the diaries at the time. His comment was, "Naturally, the visitor was greatly impressed and attracted towards Baba with this distinctively superhuman demonstration. There was a rumor of Baba's death going around Ahmednagar one day, and suddenly all these devotees from Ahmednagar started rushing out to Meherabad. Now it's 1926 January. So Baba's comment was, definitely I will not drop this body for the next 26 years at least. Though I will not keep this body for more than 90 years of age. So that gave us, right there in 1926, he gave a time frame where he was going to drop his body. It would be between 1952 and 1984. It's interesting because he had the first of the car crashes in 1952. But within that, I was just looking at it, figuring the time, the exact middle of that time frame that he gave on that day would be the day at the end of July 1968 when Baba made the comment, my work is completed 100% to my satisfaction. Interesting. Now there were a lot of plans because Baba wanted to celebrate the coming birthday in a big way. So logistics were the practical problems, were the issues. The first thing they had to do was consider where people could park because now there was, as I said, this issue of clogging the road. So this area here near the wells, both sides, was designated for parking. Any kind of motor vehicles, tongas, bullock carts, and if there was more, they would finish this area here and just keep parking along the road towards Arangan. That was their parking allotment.
This was India's first parking crisis.
Yes? I don't know about the first, but it was an archetypal parking crisis there. On then February 3rd, Baba ordered 5 more grinders for the grinding work. And the grinding work was shifted to one corner of the Dharmshala. And in the former grinding room, there was a shift of more residence for residential accommodation for either the tailor or one of the other people in his family, I don't recall. Shows the demand. There was always, the accommodations at Meherabad were almost in constant flux. There was always a demand and a change to meet that demand. Logistics. And on that day, February 3rd, Baba wanted the new motorized pump to be fit near the well. And he told Ajaba, you fit it today or throw it away. That's the ultimatum. So they worked late into the night to get that work done. There was a mason working with them too, and Baba wanted him to work late, but he was not a Baba lover. He was a Muslim guy from Nagar, and he found a way to sneak away. So Baba had to join in with the Mandali to finish the work he wanted done on that day, which also involved refitting that hand pump. You know that hand pump that is now outside of the MPR in the garden area there? If you've been to the MPR at Meherabad, that hand pump is still there. It's missing one of the wheels. But that hand pump used to be pumped by 4 of the men, or 2 strong men, one standing on each side. That was fitted over those steel beams that are across the original well there. Still there from that day. And that foundation for that pump is still there. That was fitted that day. And Baba wanted to rework the water channel that ran from the well to the Jopti that irrigated the orchard along the way. So they brought more stones and did a better job in lining that water channel that day, filling it with... So Baba put his hands on all of that work there. People need to understand that this is all... Baba put his hands all over this work. It's very important. Very important. They worked till past 9 o'clock that evening under the lamps to complete that work he wanted to complete in that area around, from the well, the water channel to the Jopti that day. This all had to do with preparations for the birthday celebration coming up. He was very intent that the birthday celebrations that year, which was going to be the first year that his birthday would be publicly celebrated at one place with him there, that it should be a successful program. So they worked and worked on these preparations, trying to think through. There was issues, drinking water, toilets, parking, food. How were they going to, all the places to sleep, how were they going to accommodate all of these things? It was a real challenge. The next day after that, there was a stage inside our bar that was finally completed. It was a raised masonry stage, about this high off the ground, upon which they were going to present a play on the life of Shivaji. They were going to present this play not on the day the birthday was celebrated, but on Baba's actual birth date according to the Western calendar, February 25th. But then the rehearsals under the direction of Chandji went on for that play, and it became part of the nightly entertainment of the time. Whenever they were doing the rehearsals, all the residents of Meherabad would come and watch that as entertainment in the Sai Darbar also. On February 13th, Baba told Ajuba, the carpenter, that he wanted a cabin on the stage of Sai Darbar constructed. He gave the dimensions. It had to be 6 feet wide, 5 feet deep, 5.5 feet tall, 2 doors on the front. Wooden structure placed in the rear center of the stage on Sai Darbar. So they started working. Baba told him he wanted it done by midnight, February 17th to 18th, because Baba's birthday was to be celebrated on February 18th. He finished it a few minutes before midnight. They managed to just get it done. So it was ready. Baba wanted that to be his seat to greet people coming for his birthday celebration. So the Gadi was placed there before the 2 open doors of that new cabin. Mera gave a sari, one of her best saris, to be placed over Baba's Gadi there. What I'll do now is read you the description of that birthday. I could tell it, but I've written it here in a more descriptive way. Meher Baba's 32nd birthday was celebrated on February 18th, 1926. Hundreds of people had already arrived the day before, but now they were coming by the thousands by any means of transportation. Demand for darshan began from early morning. Baba had consented to the ceremonial bath, so by 8 a.m. he took his place on a stool in the special bathroom, wearing only his short cotton pants. And now that special bathroom was constructed behind the table cabin. The women mandali took the first turn, followed by the men mandali and then the visitors. Each person was permitted to pour only 1 tumbler of water over Baba and then attempt to put their hands on his body for at least a few seconds. With several thousand people gathered around the bathing room, hoping to get a chance within the allotted hour, it quickly became a frenzy, and the mandali had to begin their long day of crowd control around Baba. All this happened while the noisy band of drums and brass played on. This is another thing they would do, bring one of those noisy village bands when Baba was having the ceremonial bath and make all that noise. So not only it was all this confused action, but people were shouting all the time because there was so much noise they couldn't hear what they should do next. All this happened while the noisy band of drums and brass played on. He patiently tolerated the assault of devotion, stopping after 1 hour, to the disappointment of the majority who missed their chance. In fresh clothes, with the mandali locking hands to form a cordoned ring around him, he was led to the seat on the Sai Darbar stage for the birthday program and arti. Angal Bleeder began his Puran citing similarities of Baba's early life with those of the past avatars. The dream that Shireen Mai had just before Merwan's birth was also publicly recounted for the first time. Along with the rain of colored powder around the Gadi during the birth ceremony at 10 a.m., soon the cabin was buried in a huge mound of garlands and bouquets presented by the queue of devotees. By the morning, this whole cabin, this new cabin, was buried in flowers. How many people were coming? Beginning at 11:30, the Mandali broke away from the crowd in shifts for lunch. Bapu Brahman was directing the team preparing the food throughout the day, which was consumed as rapidly as it could be cooked. By noon, it was obvious that the days of facilities preparations were woefully inadequate. Dozens of vendors had set up their stalls on each side of the road. 6 or 7 trucks and buses began running continuously to bring people from the Ahmednagar stations, returning with those who had succeeded in getting Baba's darshan. Yet the crowd continued to grow way beyond the anticipation of the Mandali, most of which were now preoccupied with maintaining a controlled area around Baba with an orderly but rapid queue for his darshan. The darshan program continued there until 6 p.m. when Baba consented to be carried up the hill in a special palanquin. Accompanied by many singing parties and bands, groups of his lovers danced in delight as the procession made its way up the hill. With a crowd of more than 10,000 at the tank, the women Mandali, led by Gulmai, performed Baba's arti again there. The Mandali had abandoned the idea of getting supper that day, but since it was Thursday, Baba walked with the still jubilant procession to Kaka Shahane's in Arangaon, where the large amount of tea that was served to everyone in the immediate vicinity of Baba was served to everyone until it had run out. Baba and the Mandali returned to Sai Darbar, where he took his seat at the cabin on the stage and continued giving darshan to the huge, eager crowd. The Mandali formed a human cordon again and continued their duty of controlling the area around Baba, enforcing a safe and quick darshan process. For a few hours after dark, a display of fireworks added the grandeur to the great crowd at the time, occasion. At night, Meherabad was liberally lit with gas lamps, and people continued to come into the night. The crowd at that time was estimated to be about 20,000. After midnight, Baba stopped giving darshan and retired to the table cabin. Some of the Mandali took positions around it to ensure there would be no disturbance. Those who arrived after midnight either went away disappointed or tried to find some place to spend the night, along with several thousand others who still hadn't had a chance for his darshan that day. Most of them slept in and around Sai Darbar that night. The Mandali finally got to bed after 1 a.m., exhausted from one of the longest, most strenuous days of their lives. Now let's go to the next image.
We have to end it.
Okay.
Here.
I'm going to
Continue tomorrow.
Okay, I'm going to finish reading this and
Yes.
we'll end. From 6:30 the next morning, Baba sat to the west of the table cabin, giving darshan to the remaining crowd until 11 a.m. This rare photograph is of that scene. The crown Baba is wearing was the first one made for him by Mehra and Khurshid. It was estimated, and I say, that over 50,000 people had come to Meherabad that day. Even at this time, we've never seen a crowd of people that large at Meherabad in one day.
That was his first birthday celebrated.
First
public.
birthday publicly celebrated. Of course,
Peter,
yes.
I believe that crown is on display in the museum, the West Wing.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is. It's in rotation. It's one of the things you'll see. Baba has his back there. This is that tree. Okay? This is that tree here by the road. And this is the table cabin. Baba has his back to the side of the table cabin there. And this is his gadi. These are the people here.
And where is the Dooney?
Dooney is over here, in front.
Yeah, in front.
These are all the things people brought, and Baba would, give people things also and have darshan. This is a very rare picture. This year I saw one other photograph that was most likely taken on this day. Inside Darbar, the only one I've ever seen. We'll continue tomorrow.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.